content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Gigi. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up with no chasers. Before I get things started, as I always do, I want to make sure that all the haters are having a good afternoon. Hello, how are you? When you come in, can you please make sure that you hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell notification button so you can stay on top of what's going on here on the Green Gorilla channel. And as I always do, I'd like to give a special shout out and some big ups to all of the people who support the Green Gorilla channel. Let's get that process started. Big up to Charles Finney, Interesting Thought, Lee Ways, BMROC, Blacksworth 404, BD Main, Black Men Being Brutally Honest, Michael Ross, Lord Hamal, and Apex Prowler. Thank you, gentlemen. Shout out to Ezekiel Will, Naomi Gary, J. Cleveland Green, The Toxic Masculinist, Brotherly Love 215, Pulpit 28, No Sleep, Broken Blade, Mr. King, Larry R., and Seth's Son. Thank you. Shout out to Devon Love Ridge, Afro Troop TV, Show Me, Spain Man, Ben Cannon Kenton, Seventh Coast Dojo, Anthony Davis, I'm Just Jules, An Honest Look, Sherlyn Woe, and Ricky Dawson. Thank you so much. Shout out to Stefan, Julius Ferguson, Truth 7360, Mr. Me Too, Call for President, Superman's Cape, Gold Professor, AKs and Curtains, H-Town, Roguish the Buildmonger, and Adrian Thomas. Thank you so much. Big up to Electrician 480, Binga, Cutting Up with the Jones, Zanco, D. Scott, Path Guy, Pete Rock, Aaron Peters, Barnolis Dardar, and Vincent Lindsay. Thank you. Big up to Beautiful Trauma, Quiz the Poet, Black Wizard, ADOS, Jazz Deck, Shadow Observer, Sugar T, Artisan MC, Troy Warren, Mrs. KP Bailey, Alan Wiley, and The Face. Thank you so much. Shout out to Life of Commerce, Dreamlit, Timothy Blewett, Jeffrey Speed, Marvin Battle Jr., Adam, BGS Ivmore, Ignatz Mouse, Brian Peaks, and Scott Haywood. Thank you so much. Shout out to Black Uru, Dr. Tree 33, Leroy Honeycutt, 77 Base X, Brian McMurray, Karen S., Charles Rogers, Rick Ross, Sandra Jean 955, Charles Gilmore, and Greg. Thank you. Shout out to Barry Little, Mr. Valentino, Cameron 87, Doc LaRock, Mark Swift, Odd Collar, Donald Watts, Coach Hotep, Old Soul Chief, Mr. Blue Collar, and TD Hip Hop Media. Thank you. Shout out to Drew Main, Mr. Heat, Sir Anthony, MLR, Universal 178, Rasheed Barnes, Aaron Smith, D. Ace, Red Pill Revelator, A Double, Dr. Tiasan Johnson, Kalon Jakala, Hostile Adept, and W. Pierre 1. I'd also like to give a shout out to David Carroll, Forrest Windu, and Kevin Samuels, man. Big up to those gentlemen, man. In addition, I'd like to give a shout out to the people who support me on Patreon, Passport OG, JEK, Chris Flowers, Christopher Burton, Daxby, J Live, Rashawn Phillips Sorrells, Keith Bass, Nick, Albert C, Dr. Ben Vincent, J. Cleveland Green, I'm the Light of My Father, Waffle Weave, Tyrone Hampton, Darnell Smith, Excalibur, Pursuer Prisoner, Taz, Dragon 59, J. Bailey, Mr. Michi Momal, and the Sangwa. Thank you so much for supporting the Green Gorilla channel on an ongoing basis. I really appreciate it. Thank you. You all deserve a round of applause, so here it comes. And if you're wondering how you can support the Green Gorilla channel on an ongoing basis, here's how you do it, and I'll be back with what I'm supposed to do. What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel, the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chasing. Today, I want to introduce you to my new membership program that consists of 5 levels where you can invest in the Green Gorilla channel on a monthly basis and receive level-specific perks. Memberships are special because they improve the quality of the content of the channel and will help me to be able to keep the channel going. Now, to participate in the Green Gorilla Channel membership program, all you have to do is hit the join button, which is located right next to the subscribe button on my channel page. Now, for all of my subscribers who decide not to participate in my membership program, nothing will change. The content will keep coming the way it always has. Thanks for watching, and be careful out here, people. Bless. All right, everybody, I'm back. I'm Gigi. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla Channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up with no chasers. And, it seems that yesterday I seem to have ruffled some feathers. Got people a little upset. Got them pissed off a little bit. Didn't intend to do that, but, it comes with the territory, man. So it is what it is. Shout out to Ron Matthews. How you doing, sir? Big up to you. Just comes along with the territory, man. I'm not here to be you guys' life coach or anything like that. Like, that's not my goal, man. My goal is to, explicate in the best way I can what I perceive to be the truth. And, I'm a philosopher, so, I'm not here to placate your ego and to give you confidence and things of this nature. Like that's for you to do. That's for you to improve yourself with. Okay, I'm here to tell you the truth as I see it. That's it. And you can take it and do with it as you will. But I'm not a counselor. I'm not here to, to make sure that your confidence is up to par or, to give you, game or anything like that. Here and there, I'll post things that I think are informative. Or that can accentuate your life in a multiplicity of ways. But, for the most part, I'm here to tell the truth. I'm here to talk about justice, to point out injustice and things of that nature. I'm not here to, build a home or a house or a community or anything like that. I'm here to, talk to you about justice-related issues. That's what I'm here for, okay? So at any rate, I do want to address something, just a comment, and no disrespect to this person. I think he's, in good faith responding to what I said yesterday. But I think, before I get into what else it is that I'm about to do, I do want to, respond to it in brief, not in length, but, small response, okay? So at any rate, this guy, it's very, very small here. He basically, he says, look, to play devil's advocate, the first money was typically derived from nature, that is, natural goods. And look, there's no disputation. I mean, I kind of went into an explanation of John Locke and how he perceives the invention of money. And I for the most part, I assume that it's pretty much accurate. But the idea is that, the first money is not derived from nature, but the trade and bartering of natural goods did occur. But that's not money. That's redefining what money actually is. And that's a sleight of hand, but it doesn't work. It doesn't suffice to differentiate between what money actually is, especially the way that we utilize it now, and forms of distribution that existed prior to the advent or the proliferation of the use of money in exchange for goods and services. So no, money does not come out of nature. It never has. Money is not natural. Money is a human convention. It is an artifice. That's what it is. And you can try to revise it as you will. I mean, and an economist can try to revise it and to interpolate it into, a newfound definition. It's not going to work. Okay? It's not. Now, money is a medium. Okay? Goods in and of themselves are not mediums. They're things that are actually being traded that can be utilized by human beings in the real world. Money cannot be utilized outside of the context of it being an instrument of trade. That's it. Take for example, if you have a boatload of money and you have no one to exchange it with, what is the use of the money? What good is the money? The thing that I can utilize as a metaphor for the uselessness of money outside of the context of exchange is Gilligan's Island, where you have, a couple, the Hurstons, I think that's the name of these people, the Howells, I think. Thurston Howell III, I think is the guy's name. He's a millionaire or something like that, right? And he has his wife on this island with him. They were on a cruise. They're part of the group of persons who got shipwrecked, right, on Gilligan's Island or whatever. And they have money. I mean, they have money. They actually brought money on the trip with them. But the money is useless on the island because it doesn't do anything. It's nothing. It has no value on the island. A shell has no value outside of the context of what you're utilizing it for. But in and of itself, like, money has no intrinsic value. It has instrumental value, is what I'm trying to get at, okay? So we went back and forth, but, gold in and of itself, one could argue, okay, well, gold has innate value and gold has been used as a currency. Okay, fine. But just because something that occurs in nature is used as money in and of itself doesn't mean that money exists in nature. It still doesn't. I mean, money was, given value because it didn't rust or something. Like, it was a metallic substance that didn't rust, and I guess it has some aesthetic value. But I mean, prior to the advent of modern electronics, like, what is gold actually really useful for anyway? Of course we know that Gilligan's Island is fictional, dude. It's a fucking goddamn metaphor, bruh. Like, I mean, come on, man. We know this shit is fictional. But money is fictional, man. That's the point. It's a fucking artifice, bruh. It's man-made. I don't understand what you niggas don't understand, bruh. I don't fucking get you guys, man. I'm not here to stroke your egos or to fucking tell you a lie. Look up anywhere, man. Even look up economics in and of itself. Look in the economics textbook. And most often you'll find that money is something that does not have intrinsic value, bruh. And we know Gilligan's Island is fictional. I'm just using a fucking thought experiment for the sake of argument, bruh. If I were to take you and put a whole bunch of cash in the house and you can't fucking spend it anywhere, what value does money have, bruh? It's a piece of fucking paper. What is it worth, man? They only have value because you agree that it has value. Currencies go up and down, bro. Just because something was, human beings are fucking live in nature, but everything they create is not natural, dog. Plastic is not fucking natural, nigga. So now you're gonna say everything human beings create is natural? That's bullshit, man. That's bullshit. Money is not natural. Electricity occurs in nature, but the harnessing of electricity and shit? Come on, bruh. When you say something is artificial, it means that human beings made it, bruh. That it doesn't occur in nature. That's what artificial means. You guys act like you never been to no fucking school or nothing, bruh. You guys act like you fucking ignorant as shit. I just don't understand you dudes, man. I don't get it, bruh. And this is the other thing that kills me, bro. Straight for real, man. Like, look, all you guys who you think you know economy, you know economics and finance and shit. My whole thing is, first of all, if money is an artifice, that it doesn't occur in nature, and it's not fucking real, actually, it's a human convention, then all of the fucking musing and the philosophical discourse that takes place about it is also it's based on some bullshit. Economics is not a science, bro, like physics, like chemistry or biology, bro. It's a social science, bro. It's not a fucking science, man. If anything, economics is the same. In order to get economics off the ground, you have to have a metaphysics of the human person. You have to say something about human nature and what the nature of human psychology is. And I tend to believe that modern philosophers like John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, all of the classical liberals who come after them, I think they have the metaphysics of the human person absolutely wrong. They don't have it right. All I'm trying to do is say, hey, look, money is an artifice. That's all it is. It's a medium of exchange. Yes, indeed it is. But it's an artifice. It's a human creation. It's a fabrication. It is a construct. That's what it is. And just like the guy Dessalines is saying, they come in and out of existence. At the current moment, put it this way. Let me be real simple and basic about this, and then I'm going to get on to the ghetto shit. Here's something real basic you should understand. How long ago did the human species manifest into reality? When did the human species, Homo sapiens sapiens, come to pass? When did they come to be in existence on this planet? Some scientists say 300,000, 200,000 years ago. Between 300,000 and 200,000 years ago, Homo sapiens sapiens began to evolve on the planet Earth. Number two, it would seem to me that prior to the creation of money, men existed. Or am I wrong about this? Which came first? Man in existence or something that man created as a medium of fucking exchange? Which one came first? So if man was before or prior to money, then the concept of manhood and masculinity and the function and the teleological end of what a man is and what he does has to exist prior to the existence of money. So therefore, if man comes before money and it is a creation of man, then how can manhood be defined by money or the accumulation or the appropriation of money itself, bruh? How? Shout out to Cutting Up with the Jones. Says, thanks for the work, GG. You got it. Mr. King says, fantastic content. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. The point is, if it's the case that manhood or what masculinity existed prior to the development of money as a medium of exchange, then now how can it possibly be that money is the characteristic that you utilize, or the accumulation of money be the thing that you use to define what manhood actually is? Makes no sense to me, man. But anyway, look, let me get to the ghetto shit, bro. At the end of the day, I just don't understand a lot of you guys, man. And I personally don't think that modern philosophers are right about the metaphysics of the human person. Now, I can go, at some point, I can go into it. I've been through it before, but I can go into it again. But at any rate, man, what we're doing is we're reading a book called Dark Ghettos, Injustice, Dissent, and Reform. And I stopped off at a section called Self-Respect. Okay? That's where I stopped off at. Self-respect and injustice is where I left off at. And I'm reading this book because a lot of people have a lot to say about the ghetto, but they don't really have a system by which to assess and to make judgments and to make determinations about what ought to be done about the ghetto. And they don't use a justice-related framework to talk about it. Very often they use this moral framework in order to talk about the worthiness or the unworthiness of people in the ghetto, and then they make all of these proclamations about who should be left behind, who's morally reprobate, and so on and so forth. So my goal is, okay, well, at least let's look at it from a philosophical point of view. Okay? Now, this chapter we're in right now, it's like the second chapter, I think, and it's called, or the third chapter, Liberty, Equality, and Fraternity. Okay, what's the section? But the culture, the chapter's named Culture. That's what it is. It's my bad. So it's the section is Liberty, Equality, and Fraternity. But ultimately, he's talking about moral reform in this chapter. Like, he talks about culture, and then he talks about moral reform. Okay, and of course, black culture, especially ghetto culture, is more often than not perceived to be something that's just incorrigible, right? So what are ghetto traits? What are they? The lack of conventional occupational ambition or the rejection of the American work ethic, hostility or skepticism towards formal education, the devaluation of traditional co-parenting within the nuclear family, distrust of established authority, in particular officials of the criminal justice system, but also teachers and members of the clergy, the use of so-called vulgar language and street vernacular, words like niggas, bitches, and hoes, and things of this nature, hedonistic orientation towards intense and immediate pleasures like sex, gambling, drinking, fighting, recreational drug use. In addition to this, right, young men are thought to regard promiscuity and sexual infidelity as something that's acceptable, and they attach little to no stigma to it. To teenage pregnancy, to non-marital childbearing, paternal desertion, the sustenance and the maintenance of single mother households. Some people, shun any acclamation to a life that is productive, so to speak. Many in the ghetto are supposed to, be preoccupied with style more than substance and take personal, delight in being able to demonstrate their ability to engage in conspicuous consumption with like luxury brands and things of this nature. Sometimes street crime is perceived as something that's laudable and tolerated or even embraced. The readiness to use deception, manipulation, and violence to achieve one's goals, one could argue those are all ghetto traits. Now, as far as I'm concerned, like, let's just be honest about this, man. Let's just be honest about this, man. Aren't those traits also just traits that are pervasive in Western culture in general? Like, haven't Europeans used deception, manipulation, and violence to achieve their aims? Huh? Who are the people who own the luxury brands and the high status brands? Who makes and manufactures and advertises and markets them? Who are the very people who fought for the right to abortion and single parent families? Who fought for these things? Who developed and were the authors of the sexual revolution? Who taught black people how to cuss and how to use profanity? I mean, after all, we're using the English language. Did like ghetto people create the word fuck and shit and bitch and ass? Did we create those words? So, I mean, I'm not saying that, the author of this text is basically trying to pin every facet and feature of moral depravity on black folks, but I'm like, come on, man. We learn these things in the context of Western American culture. But then the question becomes, okay, well, what to do about this? People say, well, we need to engage in some kind of reform. Now, I'm not going to get into the particulars of like all of this chapter. I just want to get through the rest of it. And then at some point, I'll do a recap of where we are, the whole text up into the part where we talk about family life, because that's coming next. Okay? So, the whole thing is, okay, well, people have all these suggestions. Well, we gotta, do something in order to change the culture or the moral values of the people in the hood, because it's suboptimal. This is a crippling kind of culture that prevents black folks from, especially ghetto denizens, from being able to get ahead and be interpolated into mainstream American culture. So anyway, he says, look, many people, liberals especially, perceive that like the cultural divergence that exists within the ghetto, these are usually perceived as cultural traits that are a response to conditions of injustice. But nevertheless, they still have to be modified if people who exist within the ghetto are to somehow overcome these injustices and ultimately acclimate to mainstream American culture. Okay? And he says the liberals tend to think that the government should do something proactive about poverty. Instituting feasible anti-poverty measures is necessary. Some might therefore be tempted to accept moral reform as a part of a liberal solution to the problem of ghetto poverty. And then the author says, he's interjecting his own opinion here. Yet, liberal moral reform is neither wise nor morally coherent because it doesn't give proper weight to the importance of self-respect. Shout out to BGS, I see you out there. So then he goes on to define what self-respect is and how it relates to injustice. Okay, so that's where I'm picking up at. Okay, now I might read 10 to 15 pages of this, and then I'm gonna, call it quits because the chapter goes to 116. Okay, right now I'm at 96. I'm not reading that much. I'm not gonna read 20 pages today. I'm not doing it. Okay, might read 10, might even read 12 or 15, but I definitely ain't reading 20. So anyway, he says, Tommy Shelby, self-respect is a value open to a variety of interpretations. Then he makes a reference to a philosopher by the name of John Rawls, okay? Rawls emphasizes the importance of ensuring that citizens have an opportunity to develop and maintain a sense of self-respect. Instead of using the term self-respect to refer to what Rawls has in mind, I use, and this is Tommy Shelby speaking, I use self-esteem, a term Rawls uses as a synonym, apparently a synonym for self-respect. Following others, I distinguish this value from a different, though related one, that we might also want to call self-respect. So ultimately, Rawls has, an interchangeable conception of self-respect and self-esteem, but Tommy Shelby wants to differentiate between self-respect and self-esteem, okay? That's what's going on here. So the author says self-esteem has two aspects. And I'm going to highlight that here. A secure conviction that one's fundamental purposes are worthwhile. And confidence, too, in one's ability to realize these purposes. So that's self-esteem. A secure sense, right, that the things that you have as purposeful in your life are worthwhile, and a confidence in your ability to actually carry forth the purposes that you consider to be, or to, to accomplish what you perceive to be worthwhile, okay? So then he says, well, self-esteem is a kind of self-confidence. Confidence in the value of one's basic ambitions, your goals, and confidence in your ability to realize these aims. So it's the setting of goals and having value, in the goals that you set, and having, some sort of confidence that you're able to actually attain or achieve the ends that you set out for yourself. And then he says, well, or to put it another way, self-esteem is a combination of self-worth and self-efficacy. Okay? So far, so good. We have a healthy sense of self-esteem when we regard our fundamental ends as valuable, your life plans as valuable, and consider ourselves competent to secure these ends. We have a diminished or damaged sense of self-esteem when we think our plans in life lack value substantively, or we are plagued by self-doubt. And that's important to see. I'm going to highlight that as well. Then he says, well, in any pluralist society, where by definition there is deep disagreement about fundamental values, citizens often adhere to conflicting conceptions of the good life. Now, if you're not somebody who's a liberal philosopher, you probably don't understand what that sentence means, but it ultimately, in simple terms, it means this. You live in a society that's heterogeneous, it's diverse. There is no overarching goal in American life where all of the citizenry perceives the same end as good. There are different people with different concepts about what's valuable in the West, okay? And often these ideas about what the good life consists in come into conflict. So, I mean, like, you got liberals and conservatives. You got woke people, and you got people who are more conservative and, more traditional. You got people who are heterosexual, and then you got people who are queer. You got people who are Islam, Muslim, and then people who are Christian. So there's different people with different value systems and different ideas about what the good life inheres in, okay? Then he goes on to say, but a primary good, and he says again following Rawls, is something that all rational persons can be expected to want, regardless of their fundamental purposes, as such goods are generally useful for achieving our various aims. So in essence, he's defining a Rawlsian primary good. It's a good that a person would want regardless as to whatever else it is they want, okay? What are, an example of such goods, primary goods? Liberty, leisure, health, education, income, and wealth, okay? Whatever else it is that you want, you're going to want primary goods such as freedom, free time, health, education, a source of income, and the ability to, preserve it. You're going to want that regardless as to whatever else it is that you want, okay? And he says self-esteem is a primary good Because when you don't have it, none of your practical aims will seem worthwhile. And you won't attempt to achieve those things, or we won't attempt to achieve those things that we regard as valuable. Apathy, depression, and despair may take over. Moreover, one generally feels shame when one experiences an injury to one's self-esteem. This shame is a response to one's failure to exhibit the personal qualities and achievements one regards as most worthwhile. In other words, you feel like a failure. You feel shame when you fail to accomplish a task that you set out for yourself because you don't have the efficacy or the wherewithal to actually attain or achieve it. Okay? So Rawls views self-esteem as a natural primary good rather than a social one, because society, and in particular the state, has no means for distributing self-esteem directly. But there are social bases of self-esteem that a basic structure can support or undermine. One's sense of self-worth, the first component of self-esteem, is socially supported when those one admires appreciate and affirms one's values and achievements. We will usually develop and maintain a sense of self-worth provided we belong to at least one association or community within which our activities are publicly affirmed. So, it's a social good, okay? As opposed to something you can do by yourself. Your sense of self-worth is buttressed by the affirmation of others, okay? These associative or communal ties also strengthen self-efficacy, which is the second component of self-esteem, because they reduce the likelihood of failure and provide collective defense against self-doubt when failure does occur. And Rawls is no doubt correct when he suggests that in a just democratic society, we should expect a diverse array of informal communities and formal associations within which members will develop ideals that cohere with their aspirations and talents. So it's going to be a different, like a cornucopia of formal and informal associations where people, will be able to develop ideals that match up to their aspirations and their talents. Now he says, in keeping with my focus on non-ideal theory, the question he addresses is, what should we expect in an unjust society in terms of self-efficacy and self-esteem? Okay? What should we expect in an unjust society? He says, in an unjust society, there may also be a variety of communities and associations with their own ideals. And these forms of group affiliation may also develop among those who are severely disadvantaged. Moreover, the cultural traits that characterize some of these communities and associations may have been cultivated in response to or otherwise shaped by the unjust institutional arrangements. Now you can just imagine here what he's alluding to. Probably maybe gangs, just to give one example, right? Which one could argue serves the same function. I mean, one could argue, okay, a gang is not a positive, form of association, but there are goals that people have within the context of gangs and ideas about self-efficacy within the context of a gang. But, I digress. So anyway, he says, these affiliations may nevertheless perform essentially the same social function, namely sustaining and enhancing self-esteem as their counterparts under just arrangements. So he says, let's distinguish self-respect from self-esteem. So I'm going to highlight that there. See what he's getting at here. And shout out to, I don't know who it was that just healed me up on the Cash App, but I appreciate it. I can't look at it right now. I'm in, too far away the phone is. But anyway, self-respect can be an element of a person's sense of self-worth. Okay? But unlike self-esteem, the role it plays in constituting self-worth is not contingent on a person's particular ambitions or self-confidence. So he's distinguishing self-respect from self-esteem. Okay? And self-respect, unlike self-esteem, the role it plays in constituting self-worth is not contingent on a person's ambitions or their confidence. Self-respect, he says, is a matter of recognizing oneself as a rational agent and a moral equal in valuing oneself accordingly. So to me, this is going to be some kind of Kantian dignity shit, is what it sounds like to me. Okay? Self-respect is embodied and expressed in the way one conducts oneself. Those with self-respect live their lives in a way that conveys their conviction that they are the proper objects of respect. For example, they resist efforts of others to mistreat them and openly resent unfair treatment. Okay? Moreover, persons with self-respect do not believe that they must earn just treatment, though through, say, some display of virtue or personal achievement. They know that their capacity for rational and moral agency alone is sufficient to justify their claim not to be treated unjustly. So to me, what this is indicative of is moral dignity, okay? Just because you exist, okay? So that's self-respect as opposed to self-esteem. Okay? When a healthy sense of self-respect is widespread in a society, this helps to sustain just practices and to deter injustice. And where there is systemic injustice, the self-respect of society's members often moves them to reform their institutions. So if you have a healthy sense of self-respect, knowing that there's an innate moral dignity that inheres in you as a rational agent, you will resist against unjust institutions and make an attempt to reform them. Okay? Shout out to Ghetto User. Appreciate that, my brother. Appreciate that. But then he goes on to say, those with a robust sense of justice should therefore be concerned to maintain and foster self-respect in themselves and others. But self-respect has value quite apart from its contributing to maintaining or establishing a just society. Its value should not be reduced to how it promotes social welfare. Moral agents are permitted to preserve, affirm, and strengthen their self-respect even when doing so would not ameliorate unjust conditions and would not lighten their material burdens or would be personally costly or risky. So in other words, even if it is the case that self-respect doesn't lead to a change in injustice or unjust conditions, it still is intrinsically valuable, is what he's getting at there, okay? That's what he's trying to articulate here. And he makes reference to Bernard Boxill, another black philosopher, and Thomas Hill. He says, as they have argued, the person who lacks self-respect fails to have the right attitude about his or her moral status. By putting up with injustice without complaint or protest, such persons do not give moral requirements the regard they merit. So, in other words, self-respect means that you're not going to take injustice lying down if you have a healthy amount of it, okay? And I knew he was making a Kantian reference. So he said, this Kantian concept or conception of self-respect focuses on the need to show respect for moral duties. But those most burdened by injustice have additional reasons to preserve and express their self-respect. Maintaining one's self-respect in the face of injustice is not simply about respecting the authority of morality. The sense of personal investment in such respect would be inexplicable if self-respect were merely about respecting moral principles. Self-respect has value from a personal point of view and not only from an impartial vantage point. A life lived without a healthy sense of self-respect, particularly for one who is oppressed, is an impoverished life for the particular person whose life it is. So I think he's just made a series of philosophical moves in order to get to that sentence, right? Self-respect has value from a personal point of view. And if you don't have it, especially if you're oppressed, you have an impoverished life. Okay, I think that's what he's trying to articulate. Oppression can erode a person's sense of self-respect, causing one to doubt one's claim to equal moral status. So you believe that you're not worthy, you're less worthy, you're less valuable. You come to believe that you don't have innate dignity. It says we can understand an attack on one's self-respect as an action, policy, or practice that threatens to make one feel that one is morally inferior, that one does not deserve the same treatment as others. To maintain a healthy sense of self-respect under conditions of injustice, the oppressed may therefore fight back against their oppressors, demanding the justice they know they deserve, even when the available evidence suggests that justice is not on the horizon. They thereby affirm their moral worth and equal status. Agents who take action to affirm their moral standing often take pride in such actions, particularly when these acts entail some personal risks or cost. When one is subject to persistent injustice and yet successfully defends one's self-respect, this is a moral achievement. A robust disposition to resist attacks on one's self-respect can therefore be a source of self-esteem. Such self-valuing is what we might call moral pride. Conversely, willful submission to injustice can be a blameworthy failure that generates moral shame in the subject. We surrender or sacrifice our self-respect when we acquiesce to mistreatment or when we suffer such indignities in silence. So in other words, if you start daffy dancing and shit and cooning, well, you get the picture, man. You surrender your self-respect. Okay? Goes on to say, persons with a strong sense of self-respect sometimes refuse to cooperate with the demands of an unjust society. They stand up for themselves, are defiant in the face of illegitimate authority, refuse to comply with unjust social requirements, protest maltreatment and humiliation, and so on, even when they know such actions will not bring about justice or reduce their suffering. Self-respect, then, can be a matter of living with a sense of moral pride despite unjust conditions. This kind of reminds me of like if you ever read the Kerner Report and you give an exposition of, like, you know, what the authors of the Kerner report said were the causes of rioting in, you know, the 60s and the early 70s. I think it was just the 60s, you know, not the 70s. But the whole point, though, is it's a group of people, man, who are demanding, even, you know, despite dealing with injustice, that they be respected, that they preserve their dignity in some way. Okay? So anyway, it says, though self-respect has intrinsic value and great moral importance, it should not be regarded as a trump in moral deliberation. Moral agents need not and should not defend their self-respect at all costs. It is sometimes justifiable, and this is, you know, I don't know if I agree with this or not, but I guess to a certain extent it's understandable though, okay? In other words, I mean, you gotta weigh, sometimes you get, maintaining your self-respect, even though it'll get you killed, one could argue it might not be the best mode of action to take up, okay? So anyway, it says moral agents need not and should not defend their self-respect at all costs. I just want to, you know, I want to make sure, because I haven't read this far into this text. So I'm deciphering through it just like you are, okay? It is sometimes justifiable, or at least excusable, to sacrifice a bit of self-respect to protect others from harm, like your family, which a lot of black people have done, okay? Like, in order to preserve their families and ensure that their children are able to persist, they eat crow, so to speak, okay? And allow themselves to be called boys or whatever the case may be in American culture. So he says, it's excusable to some extent to sacrifice a bit of self-respect to protect others from harm, to avoid grave harm to oneself, or to achieve some worthy goal. I'm pretty sure a lot of black folks who had businesses were ridiculed and denounced, and they had to eat crow here and there in order to preserve what they had. So then he goes on to say, such sacrifices are sometimes necessary, all things considered, but the agent with a healthy sense of self-respect experiences them as sacrifices. This is important. It's something you sacrifice as a painful loss of an intrinsically valuable good. When you no longer care that others are wronging you, putting up no resistance, or when you routinely trade fair treatment for mere material gain or social status, you have lost all self-respect. Oh, man, wait a minute, man. Oh, man, when you no longer care that you're being humiliated, when you put up no resistance, or you routinely trade fair treatment for mere material gain or social status, you have lost all self-respect. Fuck it, you go ahead and nut on my face, man. You come all over my face, I don't care. Oh, man, that's fucked up, man. The duty of self-respect, and I'm crass, I'm doing this for rhetorical effect, but the point is, the duty of self-respect, like the duty of justice, is a central element in the political ethics of the oppressed. So self-respect is an essential element of the political ethics of people who are oppressed, and it has the same import as a duty towards justice. Okay? He said, transformer bomb, I'll give you one. Fuck it. I'll give you one, bro. And I know this shit ain't titillating, man, but look, this is important shit. You know what I'm saying? Now, I don't agree with everything Tommy Shelby says, and you will see why as we, come to the end of the next chapter of this text. But boy. Anyway, he says, with these remarks as a background, I can now state my principal objection to moral reform. And of course, moral reform is an attempt to change the fucked up value system of black people from the ghetto, right? Which some of you say needs to happen drastically or quickly. Anyway, what he says is, even if the suboptimal cultural divergence hypothesis is basically sound, meaning that it's true, and reasonable, or whatever the case may be. If the hypothesis is basically sound, moral reform attacks the ghetto poor's social basis of self-esteem and fails to honor their need to preserve their self-respect. So this is him saying this, like, okay. Now I gotta look into this. Come on, man. Let me fucking highlight this, man. Stop this shit. So there's two things, right? He says even if the suboptimal cultural divergence hypothesis is sound, moral reform does two things. It attacks the ghetto poor's social basis of self-esteem, and two, fails to honor their need to preserve their self-respect. So it attacks the social basis of self-esteem, which has to do with the development of life plans and your ability to actually achieve them, right? Or confidence that you're actually able to achieve them. And also, it fails to honor the oppressed need to preserve their self-respect, which basically is the idea that they have innate moral dignity, regardless as to what else there is that they have, okay? Shout out to Be About Peace and Pleasure. Thank you, sir, for becoming a member of the Green Gorilla channel, man. I really appreciate it. And I know I'm a little bit crass at times. I don't apologize for it. I'm a human being, man. I like the way that I articulate myself. It just is what it is. Sometimes I'm a little bit vulgar. That's just how I get down, man. But thank you for being on board, man. I appreciate that, man. Thank you for getting down and coming on board. Thank you. Anyway, so he goes on to say, the author does, that these two consequences create serious practical limitations and moral pitfalls to moral reform, of course. And they suggest that moral reform is afflicted with the downgraded agency problem characteristic of the medical model of social reform. And if you remember, the downgraded agency The downgraded agency problem is the problem of the idea that everyday, sometimes unusual or often misunderstood choices of those in disadvantaged communities are viewed, when seen through the lens of the medical model, as at best devoid of moral content or political intent, or at worst pathological. And what the medical model does is invite people to see dysfunction where perhaps maybe there is resistance to injustice taking place. Okay, so this is Tommy Shelby, right? That's his argument, right? So he says, furthermore, moral reform is incompatible with respect for personal autonomy. That is, with respect for an agent's legitimate claim to govern his or her own life as that agent judges fit. In the remainder of this chapter, I elaborate these concerns and then suggest an alternative approach that I believe avoids these difficulties. It is more in line with core liberal values and is more likely to be effective in achieving the needed cultural and structural reforms. So he has an alternative, okay? As opposed to moral reform. Shout out to Herb G, man. Shout out to Herb G, man. Appreciate that, my brother. Straight up. Now, I just want to examine how much further I'm going to go with this. I think I might go. Let me see, man. I might go. Yeah, I'll go to 104 and no more. I might want to sneak this section here in though, if it ain't too long. It looks like it's too long. Yeah, it's too long. So I'll go to 104. Okay? I'll go to 104. Now, let me just say this before I even start reading any further, man. Like, I'm a critic of modernity, okay? So in many ways, one could argue that, like, my philosophical orientation is postmodern. Now, I'm not a moral nihilist. I'm not a sophist or a moral nihilist. I'm not a moral subjectivist or a moral, skeptic. I believe that there's a way to ground or undergird morality. And I don't think that negative liberty is the best means by which to do it, because like I said the other day, there's a difference between libertas and licentia. I don't think that distinction is too often evinced or teased out of contemporary, conversations related to freedom and what it actually entails. But contemporary, modern philosophy, let's just be frank about it. What modern philosophy is, in general, is a rejection of ancient virtue ethics. It's what it is. It is what it is. And I think licentia in and of itself, just the ability to do whatever the fuck it is you want to do. And, you can't tell me what to do. Society can't give you any goals or overarching values. First of all, I think that, you can't escape it at all anyway. It's just impossible for you to escape some overarching notion of what the good is. That's just my opinion. Now, that's my opinion. Even though people say, well, we live in a pluralistic society, you shouldn't be able to determine what the good is for different persons. But the concept of the right in and of itself is a concept of what's good. You can't escape making some kind of proclamation about what the good is. It's impossible to do. And the idea that all we just need is more freedom, I don't necessarily know, especially more licentia. I don't think that that's like requisite to ensuring that people's dignity is going to be preserved. Or freedom be attained. I don't see it that way. It's not my opinion. So, but more on that later, okay? I'm going to go to 104, and we're at 100 now, so I'll go to 104, and I'm going to stop. Before I do that, though, let me take a quick break right fast, man. I'll be right back. I need to take a commercial break right quick. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back, man. I just had to take a quick break real fast, man. But anyway, so the next section is entitled The Practical Limits of Moral Outreach. So, of course, you know, everybody wants to change the conditions of the ghetto, either through, you know, like the first chapter is a discussion of how integration is the answer. You know, eventually I'll adumbrate that argument, and so you can see how all of this fits together. Now, of course, you know, Tommy Shelby objects to, you know, integration. He thinks it overburdens the poor and forces them to, you know, let go of their networks and the comfortability of the way of life that they've etched out for themselves in the face of oppression in order to ameliorate their condition. But there's no guarantee that their condition will be ameliorated if they find themselves amongst white folks who don't necessarily have to engage in bonding practices such that, you know, it will actually, you know, remedy the problems that were created through ostracization and marginalization in the first place, okay? But here he's, you know, the other approach is moral reform or moral outreach. He's like, look, there are limitations to this. And we just been recently, you know, discussing how moral reform might lead to a diminishment in poor person's self-respect and self-esteem, okay? But now says, okay, you know, what are the the practical limits rather of moral outreach? So as outlined earlier, the methods of moral reform vary greatly. One class of methods, moral outreach, relies on dialogue, lectures, sermons, education, training, and counseling. The idea is to effect a change in cultural patterns through, for example, moral exhortation, role models, counseling services, education programs, or faith-based efforts. Many of these interventions are no more than attempts to convince some among the ghetto poor that their cultural ways are obstacles to their escape from poverty. Other interventions might seek to make some residents of ghettos ashamed of their suboptimal mores by, for example, subjecting them to public censure or withdrawing esteem. So let's shame these motherfuckers. Okay? So on one hand, you got convincing. On another, you have shaming. Or measures might be taken to encourage them to take pride in exemplifying mainstream values and identities. We got a whole bunch of coon niggas to do that shit already. Boy. I'm an American. Look at me. I'm a model man. That shit, motherfucker be trying hard to be respectful too, boy. Respectable. Anyway, perhaps supplemented with attempts to get targets of moral reform to identify less with suboptimal ghetto cultural configurations and more with the successful habits and values of middle-class persons. So in other words, we want you to identify less with ghetto shit and identify more with middle-class shit, right? The main challenge for moral outreach is getting its targets to listen to appeals and to take advantage of relevant programs. So how you get a group of people from the ghetto to listen to you? To take what you have to say about them and their condition seriously. Now he says moral outreach would seem to have the best chance of success with those for whom the weak version of the cultural divergence thesis applies. Those who strategically employ a ghetto-specific cultural repertoire only because of their belief that they lack adequate opportunities for socioeconomic advancement. So this is just a re-articulation of something that's been said before. Willing cooperation with moral reform programs might be forthcoming among those who became convinced that the existing opportunity structure is actually such that they could escape poverty were they to assimilate to more mainstream cultural ways. There might also be some willing cooperation if those targeted for moral outreach were looking for any chance at escape from poverty, even if, for example, they knew that the opportunity structure is seriously unjust and that most among the ghetto poor, no matter what reasonable efforts they made, would therefore remain in poverty. They would only have to be convinced that there are more exits from ghetto poverty than there are people actively trying to leave, and that, so in other words, there's opportunity because most people don't even know that the opportunity exists. So you're one of the lucky few. Here's your ticket to get rid of your niggerdom. Here's a way to escape your niggerdom right now. Step on up, there are only 10 seats left. Anyway, but what if there are many who have suboptimal ghetto identities, those for whom the strong version of the cultural divergence thesis applies? Now, this is just a reminder. So there's a weak cultural divergence thesis that says that ghetto culture is really an adaptation to injustice, whereas there are persons who hold on to a strong version of the cultural divergence thesis, which basically puts forth the notion that people's identities are constituted by, being divergent from the mainstream. Okay? Like, this is my identity and who I am is, encapsulated into being ghetto, so to speak, okay? So he says, what if there are many who have suboptimal ghetto identities and the basic structure is unfairly stacked against them? Here, it seems the moral outreach would have limited success. After all, our conception of the good determines what we feel ashamed of and take pride in. That is to say, shame and pride are relative to our fundamental goals and the communities with which we identify. I can't dispute that here, okay? You remember the song Scorpio? No, you're too young to understand that. You're too young to get that one in. But Scorpio's shake it, baby, show no shame. Scorpio. Anyway, that's old school shit. But anyway, if targets for moral reform reject mainstream values and embrace ghetto identities, as the strong version of the cultural divergence thesis asserts, they will not be readily shamed into conforming to mainstream norms. And And this is important. I gotta highlight this. I want to make this a different color too. Damn, come on, man. God damn, man. Act right, bro. I want to change the color on this. Make that color. So if it is the case that the strong version of the cultural divergence thesis applies to a group of people, they will not be shamed into conforming to mainstream norms, nor should we expect them to take pride in embodying mainstream virtues. So now you can't get Kodak Black, Glorilla, and a whole bunch of other motherfuckers to all of a sudden just like say, oh, you know, I'm ashamed. I'm going to, you know, transfer my values and, you know, become different. I'm going to reform. They're going to be like, man, fuck the mainstream. They will have developed alternative sources of self-worth that do not depend on mainstream institutions for validation. And that's the danger right there, okay? He says a similar point can be made about self-efficacy. Some among the ghetto poor may be confident that they would succeed, even by mainstream standards, if the basic structure they faced were fairer. Because they believe their efforts to meet mainstream standards of success are likely to be thwarted by deeply unjust social structure. These persons may develop alternative ambitions. Like what? Like, this is the classic Biggie type shit. Well, you know, like either I got a wicked jump shot or I'm slanging the crack rock. He said, Glorilla got you feeling like you gonna simp. Bro, say it ain't so, man. Say it ain't so, bro. Oh, no. Glorilla gonna make you trick the bag, dog? Damn. She gonna have you in the car. Ooh. Anyway, where people blame the unfairness of the basic structure for their inability to achieve their aims, they need not experience low self-esteem. And we have even less reason to suspect diminished self-esteem in those cases where, in response to their belief that their society is unjust, people develop basic aims they believe to be worthwhile and within reach. Indeed, the more that perceived outsiders, official agents of the state in particular, attack ghetto identities, the more we should expect those who subscribe to these identities to hold firmly to them. That's the, the inverse effect, right? The more you try to shame them, the more they cling to the identity. By hypothesis, there are distinctive forms of affiliation in ghetto neighborhoods that are central basis for the positive sense of self-worth of many among the ghetto poor. Those with such ghetto identities will therefore demand a compelling reason to change their concept or conception of the good. In the absence of a reasonably just opportunity structure, garnering the esteem of their more advantaged fellows is unlikely to be reason enough. Like, why should I be looking for your approval? What's so special about you? Why should I, want your esteem? Anyway, He goes on to say, recall that the focus of this chapter is on state-operated or state-supported moral reform. In response to the alleged debilitating effects of some ghetto cultural patterns, there are some who propose not government intervention, but moral outreach by black elites, a kind of group uplift or self-help. Though such moral appeals may not be inherently objectionable, the strong version of the cultural divergence thesis suggests that this outreach would be rather limited in its effectiveness. So in other words, I want to really actually redo this one, turn it back yellow. So outreach by black elites is probably going to be something that fails as well, okay? Because a lot of these people, man, from the hood see like black elites as sellouts. Or as, let's just face it, see you as coons. You coming up here with your motherfucking fancy ass clothes on and your white boy speech, you fucking Oreo. What the fuck are you talking to me about? Okay? In many ways, black elites are representatives of the mainstream. They exemplify its values and practices and, accordingly, have been rewarded with valuable social positions and public esteem. Insofar as the ghetto poor are alienated from mainstream values, they are likely to look upon black elites with similar suspicion, like aliens, right? That is all the more likely if, as I have argued elsewhere, many among the ghetto poor believe that black elites' moral exhortations are motivated less by genuine empathy and group solidarity and more by the elites feeling embarrassed in the eyes of their white peers by the unruly behavior of poor urban blacks, or by their fear that they might be mistaken for a person with a ghetto identity. Oh! No, I'm not giving it that one. There we go. That's the Sergeant Waters and shit from the Soldier's play, Soldier Story. We gotta change you niggers, because you niggers make it bad for my business, you know? And I feel like, you know, you ought to change. If you don't change, you're making it bad for all of us black folks out here. And, you know, I want to be able to go where all white people go too. Let me stop that, man. Anyway, I got one more page to read, man. I'm done with this shit, man, for the day. I'm going this far. That's as far as I'm going. Racism and cultural explanations of black poverty. So that's the first. The first limitations, you know, have to deal with, you know, the non-influential character of proselytizing to people who have either a weak or a, you know, but mostly the people who have like a strong cultural divergence and their identities are connected into being counterculture, okay? So anyway, there's a second practical limitation to moral outreach, namely the persistence of ideological racism. Some of the cultural traits attributed to or associated with the ghetto poor, for example, attitudes towards authority, work, violence, parenting, sex and reproduction, school, and crime closely resemble well-known and long-standing racist stereotypes about blacks. Their supposed tendencies towards lawlessness, laziness, dishonesty, irresponsibility, ignorance, stupidity, and sexual promiscuity. These stereotypes have long been invoked to justify the subordination, exploitation, and civic exclusion of blacks. An implication of the cultural divergence thesis is that ghetto conditions have produced a subgroup of blacks who, because of their cultural patterns, exhibit characteristics that racists have long maintained are natural to the black race, and that these cultural traits are at least part of the explanation for why they are poor. There you go. The ontological argument about black inferiority. Okay? I suspect that this implication is part of the reason many people are suspicious of and sometimes hostile to cultural analysis of black urban poverty. They smell like rationalizations for the racial status quo. And the odor is not made better by the fact that these analyses are rooted in social scientific research than biological studies, as the social sciences have been a rich source of anti-black ideology. Okay? To make matters, so let me reverse what I just said about ontological, because biology is, one could argue, ontological, but the social sciences are supposedly making assessments about culture and things that are artificial, but still, the idea is that the cultural backwardness of black folks puts them where they are, okay? And to make matters worse, moral reform suggests that the ghetto poor are effectively incapable of altering these suboptimal traits on their own, as it calls for state intervention to change them. Moral reform programs, even voluntary ones, implicitly endorse the idea that poor blacks have personal deficiencies that they alone cannot remedy. In an era when biological racism has been largely discredited, and claims that blacks are biologically inferior are not publicly acceptable, moral reform will inevitably strike many as the functional equivalent of classic racist doctrines. Perhaps such a response to moral reform wouldn't be entirely fair. After all, there may be truth in the cultural divergence thesis. And yet, many among the poor have reason to believe that some of their fellow citizens are attracted to cultural explanations of black poverty because of racial prejudice and bias. I think that might be actually accurate to some degree. Put that there. The types of claims made about the black poor, whatever their merit, are often perceived as emanating not from genuine empathy, but from racial hostility, a sense of white superiority, or indifference to the plight of disadvantaged blacks. In light of this, some poor ghetto denizens may distrust efforts to change the cultural patterns in their neighborhoods. Their suspicion would be well grounded, for some who advocate moral reform no doubt do so because of race-based contempt or desire to maintain the racial status quo. Let me put that down. For some who advocate for moral reform often do so because of race-based contempt or desire to maintain the racial status quo. On grounds of self-respect, then, the oppressed may refuse to avoid confirming the stereotypes that are often used to justify their subjugation. In the absence of serious structural reform, and I think this is his biggest precondition here. I thought, I'm going to make it green. If there's no structural reform that's going to attend to, or to dovetail or to run in tandem with or parallel with cultural reform, then one could argue it's some bullshit anyway. But anyway, the suggestion that the ghetto poor do not value hard work and education, or that they are criminals and irresponsible parents, will strike some among the ghetto poor as yet another racist excuse for not improving social conditions in ghetto neighborhoods. The point here is not philosophical, but practical. Namely, if some among the ghetto poor possess ghetto identities, as the strong version of the cultural divergence thesis supposes, then these persons are likely to dismiss outright or strongly resist attempts by representatives of the mainstream to undermine or alter those identities. Moral reform efforts targeted at those with ghetto identities, particularly when those efforts depend on voluntary cooperation, will therefore be self-defeating. And this is where I'm going to close this shit out. Got something to say? Speak now, forever hold your peace. You know, the only thing I'm doing is trying to read a text that covers various methods of trying to reform, to alter, to ameliorate what's going on in the ghetto. I mean, here you have two approaches. One is integration. The other is moral reform or cultural reform. And here's a philosopher like, okay, well, here are the problems inherent in each approach. The rest, man, I'm just not going to read all this shit today, man. It's too much, man. Too much, too many people, too much. I'll read it, Yeah, the next time I'll get to the end of it, but that'll probably be next week. Any questions, any concerns, any rejections? Give you another break and see if you don't come in a minute, I'm gone, I'm out. Oh, my bad. I ain't mean for that to happen. But, I mean, look. I know it's a lot, like my man said, it's a lot. It's a lot to chew on. Yeah, I know it is, man. So Urban Reed has a question, and he says, look, are we to look for something new or a mixture of the two? I mean, the question is, like, what do you propose to do? I mean, there's only so many ways that you can actually remedy the issue in the ghetto, man. Like, to me, to remedy the issues related to the ghetto, first of all, just address the injustices of black folks in the past. First of all, ghettos were created. These things didn't just form out of natural ecology. The ghettos were actually formed through intention and neglect. Black people were disenfranchised on purpose. And I don't think total abandonment is the answer either. But I think the biggest solution would be for black folks to be able to receive a redress or be redressed for the injustices that they've suffered. But, the question is whether or not America will actually do that. Probably not. Talking about reparation, repairing of what's been damaged. But the question is, okay, so you got some black folks that say, well, we need to change the culture. Well, okay, genius. How do you go about changing the culture? I mean, there's so many moral advocates, and the conservatives are really like, I think that they're idealistic, but they're impractical, because the question is, well, how do you change the identities of an entire group of persons, a population of persons who basically are living in poverty? How do you change it? It's one thing to, start making moral exhortations. It's another thing to say, okay, well, what do we actually do in order to change or remedy the situation? I think the structural issues have to be redressed. But I also think, like, let's not get it twisted, man. America, in terms of thinking about setting aims and ends and goals and life plans, like, liberals want to leave that up to the individual. And that's naive as well. That's idealistic as well. And this is why I say liberals, they speak a lot of shit. I mean, they talk so much about freedom, but they neglect to realize or even to take into consideration that the state still is involved in setting out and making ends for its citizens and determining what the objectives and the aims the people are guided and directed to are. And this will become even more apparent when he starts talking about single moms and shit like that. It's what he leaves out that's the problem as far as I'm concerned. I mean, because some of the shit he's going to say in the next chapter is going to be shocking as hell, bro. I swear to God. Shocking. And in all honesty, I think he's caping. He's going to come across as super caping, man. Straight up. When I say caping, I mean caping super hard. Like, damn, that's how you feel? And I think, he's right about be about peace. You're right about that. Peace and pleasure. You're going to need power in order to change things. But the problem, okay, so look, if this were a Mideastern culture or society, you can force people to behave in a specific kind of way. You can't do that here in America, at least principally related to doctrine. That would be, like something that falls outside of the realm of justice. But now you got a problem. I mean, and you'll see the problem, bro. When I read this chapter on the family, Maybe BGS will join me then. I don't know if he will or not, if he's too busy, but this shit, boy, because this is a new jack covering of the issues brought up by Kenneth Clark a long time ago. But man, the way he treats them is totally different. But I'm more prone to say, hey, look, before you can even begin to, have an impact or a change on people's attitudes and their value systems, you need to make it right structurally. That's just the way I perceive it. A lot of structural, justice would go a long way. And I support that notion that he's using in that regard. So I'm with him on that. But like some of the shit that he says in the chapter on family and all that and reproduction, whoa, boy, it's just too much for me, man. Too much. Christopher Clipper said it was some within the state that crushed Reconstruction. Reconstruction got crushed by the South, man. They couldn't, BGS has been over this shit before. It's like, look, you got to get back to business as usual. You motherfuckers lead the economy. Like that, all the money came from the exploitation of slaves. The whole country was kind of, buttressed on the slave trade. If the South produced cotton, and if the North manufactured the cotton and made it, processed it and exported it, that's a symbiotic relationship between the North and the South. They had to get back to some, they got to get back to business as usual in some manner. And the South, man, they just couldn't let go of their folkways. And the Union was willing to, reconcile with the South in order to get back to the business. I mean, it wasn't like the Union or the North had this, commitment to justice to where they were like, okay, well, whatever it is we got to do in order to redress the injustices of the past, we're going to do it. No, they were like, shit, we got to get back to business as usual. This book is entitled Dark Ghettos, Injustice, Dissent, and Reform. It's written by a black philosopher by the name of Tommy Shelby. I do believe you can find the book online in PDF format. Shout out to what he had, asshole. Appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. But anyway, man, I'm not going to spend all day doing this shit, man. If nobody wants to have a discussion about this, people are having a discussion about this, but they're not having the discussion in a practical way and exploring what the impasses and the problems practically that you would come up with, or the moral problems that you would encounter in trying to actually engage in reform of the ghetto. There's a lot of talk about, we gotta leave these motherfuckers behind. Dude, that shit ain't gonna change nothing, bruh. I mean, it's a lot of cats out here, man, who have these megalomaniacal ideas about how things are gonna improve. And I'm like, dude, it's just, bruh, you motherfuckers are grasping, man. You believe that you're hyper moral and that you're, yourself. It's one thing to have self-esteem. It's another thing to be egotistic. And to overestimate your own, we'll put it like this. It's a difference between pride and hubris. A lot of people in this space have hubris. As far as I'm concerned, the numbers of black male success, they're just not there in order to actually support the hubris. Like, what the fuck are y'all smoking on, man? Y'all act like y'all Michael Bloomberg, Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos. I'm like, damn, these guys act like they have already solved all of the economic issues. All they got to do is just follow behind your footsteps. Like, come on, bro. Like, just be real about this shit, man. You got some deep-seated injustices that we're dealing with. So we supposed to alpha, get ourselves together and just, come on, man. It's some pie in the sky bullshit. I'm just tired of hearing it, man. Then they'll say, oh, well, those are the type of guys we don't need in space. Man, fuck you. That's all I got to say, man. Like, them type of dudes, I'll smack the shit out of one of these hoe-ass niggas. Real talk. All that old talking about how moral and how refined they are. Nigga, you just an ordinary, mundane-ass nigga like everybody else, man. That don't make you superlative in any kind of fucking way. And these guys, and a lot of judgments and assessments of people's character. Motherfucker, I want to look into your book and see what the fuck your past look like or what the fuck your goddamn bank account look like right now. Motherfuckers act like they balling out of control and shit, like they are among the elite of men in this society. And I'm like, dude, man, are you serious, man? Guys are fucking like delusional or some shit, man. So anyway, man, I'm about to holler at y'all later, man. I'll be out. I'll probably be on tomorrow. I'm doing some bullshit tomorrow. So I'll holler at y'all later, man. Peace.